So so where we left off, we had to make a quick phone call to find out because we couldn't remember. So how you said that we don't know the exact way that we told you we were having our first baby, but you said that there was that you do know how we informed you it was a boy.
Laurie called me and said, Dad, we found out what we're having, and I said, what? She said, well, you have to guess. And I said, well, give me a clue. And she said, you're going to have to buy a boat.
Yeah, there you go.
And I said, it's going to be a boy.
Yeah.
And she said, yes, it is.
Well, it's because you have 3 daughters.
Right.
No sons.
No sons.
And then your first grandchild was
a daughter,
a girl.
Yeah.
And so this was the first son in your life.
Right.
Really.
The first boy in my life. So that was...
Yeah.
I already had a boat, but she wanted me to upgrade, I think.
Yeah. Well, little did she know that Carter would end up being more like me than him.
Didn't really have his sea legs.
We're not out there hunting and fishing. And,
I've tried, but Carter's he's not a...
Now Zeke,
I told him
Zeke wants to fish.
Zeke is the man.
Yeah, he wants to fish. Yeah.
I showed him pictures of where I'm going to take him when we get together next time. So he's looking forward to it.
Oh yeah. So let's get in. So we're gonna pick up. Let's talk a little bit about your dad. And there's some I know and some I probably don't know. Talk about your dad, who he was, what he did, and let's get into some of these business principles and how we can apply those to business. So.
Well, my dad was the oldest of 8 children. He and the first 6 of the children were born. Each of them was born on a houseboat where they lived. I like to remind or let people know that the 5th child, Harris, was born. My grandfather took the other 4 children, my dad and his 3 younger ones at the time, to go raise nets. They fished for a living, and he did. And so he just had them with him in his boat, and they were out raising nets. And when he came home, my grandmother, alone, had given birth to her child, cleaned up the place, and then had supper cooked for everybody when they got back. Now, when I tell you she was a stout woman, she was.
Yeah, wow. And
so,
was it on the river, the
Chaffalon River?
That's where they so they lived on that houseboat.
They did.
They probably didn't have good cell service. Service. Oh man, that would have been rough.
I'm so impressed.
That reminded me. My grandfather used to say, "Never trust a man who would build his house on the ground." Mm-hmm. He saw a house that was built on concrete slab, and he thought, because they didn't have levees back then, and the river flooded every year, and so he thought you had to have your house up on stilts. And his was, when he built the house, he built it up on stilts.
Yeah.
And I remember asking him, and he would say, and he said it more than once to me, "Don't ever trust a man who would build a house on the ground."
There you go.
Now his vision, of course, was very tight there to the little town we were in, right on the river. Yeah. But he recognized the fact that you needed to get up higher.
Yeah.
If you were going to be in a flooded area,
there you go.
You need to be up off the ground.
I like it. So,
but he was the father of my
Give us a rundown, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that was in Krotz Springs. That was home.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think of when you hear Krotz Springs?
Spell that?
Have you been through Krotz Springs?
Maybe seen a sign.
Okay, so as an LSU fan, that's what I think of is getting speeding tickets going through Krotz Springs, speed trap on 190.
Yeah.
There's a few of them there.
Yeah.
So
one of them's in Krotz Springs.
So I think of speeding tickets. I think of the bridge. And I think of Boudin.
Yeah,
so
Billy's Boudin.
That's it. That's the 3 things.
That's it.
So that's where you grew up as well,
that's
right?
Where I grew up.
Yep.
Yeah. And my dad, when I was born, he was still finishing up a career. I guess you'd call it a career, but of delivering ice, because no one in town had electricity. No one had refrigeration. but they all had wooden ice boxes. Y'all, I'm sure, seen. That's where we, in our house, we still refer to the refrigerator not as the fridge, but as the ice box because of my growing up.
Our ice maker went out this week.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. When we're bougie, we have the Sonic ice, Yeah. And Laurie's like, after the second day, she's like, I just did not realize how much I use ice. And it's so true. And it's like it has a computer. They
in
literally.
Our little town, my dad delivered ice. You would buy 25 or 50 pounds of ice. He would bring it, come in your back door, put it in the thing, and you'd have a 25 cents or 50 cents on the top of the refrigerator, which he would take with him and go to the next house. And he went to every single house in town because everybody needed refrigerated food, and this was the only way to refrigerate. And he had the only, his father had the only ice plant within probably 100 miles of there. I don't know, it was a lot of, no, I shouldn't say that. Opelousas probably had one, so that's 20 miles. But anyway, he covered a lot of territory. And that's what he did, and he made very good money. You wouldn't think 25 cents a house, but in 1948, as Dad used to say, $1 was as big as a hubcap. To him, it was big. $1 was a lot. So 4 houses, he had made $1.
Yeah.
And back then, that was, I don't know how many beers that would buy, but it was enough. He said, the first beer I ever had, I didn't want another one. I wanted a tub full of it. And so he lived his early life drinking a lot, apparently. And I never knew that about him. My first memory of my dad, he was a Bible teacher at our church, and was just a different person from that. But he told me many vivid stories about it. But what was I saying? Anyway, so my dad started his life of business. He bought his ice from his dad and then sold it a penny a pound. And matter of fact, until I was probably 15, we still sold it for a penny a pound. But people came for it. We didn't deliver it any longer. People had refrigeration, electricity, and ice boxes, or real refrigerators. So nobody had to do that. But anyway, that's how he started. And then he bought his dad's ice plant. He bought his fish market, and he bought his grocery store. So Dad owned those. Then I helped him build.
Do you know anything about the acquisition? So these were existing businesses.
Yeah,
he bought all those.
Those 3 were.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you think there was almost some kind of synergy between those industries, or was that kind of the only businesses in town?
Well, you can't have a fish market without ice.
Yep.
You couldn't. So you had to have ice. So ice was the thing. Yep. It was the thing for the town. I mean, you survived on that ice. So it was kind of at the center of the town. So the synergy of other businesses around it, they had a meat market in the grocery store. Couldn't have it without ice. Yeah. So the ice plant was the thing. And my job every morning when I'm probably 11 or 12.
This is going to make you feel like a bad parent hearing these stories.
11
or 12, working before school.
But I would.
Well, my kids still don't cut the grass.
I went to the ice plant, and they call it pulling ice. A can of ice, which is a metal can, was about 4.5 feet tall, I guess, a foot wide, and about 2 feet across. And you fill the can with clear water, and it was suspended in a brine liquid. It was just water and salt. Dad bought 50 pounds bags of salt by the truckloads, and we kept salt in there, and the machinery there's only job was to stir the salt water. And so all night you put the water in, and the next morning you came and all of the water was now ice. And so my first job every morning was to go pull 20 blocks of ice. Now they weigh now 300 pounds. My dad designed and built a carriage system that went over this entire floor wooden doors you flipped open, and there were 4 blocks of ice under it. But you could bring this. I know nobody's seeing what I'm doing, but it was like a pantograph. You know, it would move this way and this way, because he had found an the pump cars for the railroad track they used to use. 2 guys pump it and they moved it along. Well, he took one of those and suspended it upside down and hung it on some rails, some railroad rails up this way, and so you could move this thing, what was a manual winch, and you could move it right over a can, unwind the cable, and down there you could snap it in. It was a thing up a little bit bigger than that, and it had little snaps on either end, and 2 holes in the can. Put it there. Then this was where the work came. You had to then manually pull that up out of the water, and you can imagine the suction force of that moving brine water around it. But so you take that over to a tipper, he called it, put it in there, release it from the cable, take a water hose, put water around the edge of the metal, and you would hear it go pop. That meant it was loose, and then you could just tip it over. And he had a sled he had built, wooden sled, and it went into a freezer. And we start with 20 blocks of ice every morning, and that was to ice the fish that came in. Dad averaged about 10,000 pounds of fish a day in that fish market, and so it required a lot of ice, and we shipped out. He and I talked about this a couple times, and I would just listen to what he had to say about it. But he said most fish that he dealt with, freshwater fish, that when you dress, I always thought this was funny. He said you had to dress the fish. You were actually denuding it, taking all of its clothes off, but they called it dressing fish. And so you took the scales off, you chopped the head off, you took all the guts out, and you had about 40% of the weight. So you started with a 10 pound, it weighed 4 pounds. So every day, 10,000 in, about 4,000 out. And we shipped them all over the United States. Indianapolis, St. Louis, New York City, San Francisco, Los Angeles, all by refrigerated train. So we had to build boxes, and we put 200 pounds of fish and ice in a box. And put it was a wooden box that I built, all of them, and put a wooden lid on it. And it had 4 handles. 2 men would get it, stack it, and then we'd take it to the train, put it on one of those. I know you've seen those big carts with the big old metal wheels on them. Our truck would back up, and we'd lift and put those on there. Then the bed of that trailer was the exact height of the inside of the train. So when the train got there, we just bumped up to it and put our product in there. Each one of them had a ticket on the side of it that we hand wrote that said it was going to certain sort of address, and it'd show up there the next day. So that was every day, 6 days a week.
Before Amazon.
Yeah.
And
6 days a week.
6 days a week. We did.
And
we did 10 o'clock and a 3 o'clock train.
And so you would work before school?
Yeah.
And then after school?
Well, my before school normally was ice
box.
Getting ice ready for them to use for the day. And then after school, Mom always met me at the fish market with a change of clothes, and I'd change. This was funny. Well, I didn't think it was funny at the time, but it's what Mom did. So I get in the morning, you're sweaty, and I do go do some fish work probably before school, so I stink. Dad always said it smelled like money to him, but I would take so she would take and make me get totally naked. I'm just a little boy, and she'd spray me down with a hose.
Oh, there you go.
Give me a bar of soap, and I had to, but that was my shower. But there was nobody else around, just Mom and me. And but it was kind of humiliating, I guess. It's fine. I smelled better when I went to school. I was run off from Vacation Bible School one year because I stunk too bad.
Wow. So you
that marred me for life.
so you worked in the fish.
So when I got
until...
home, when I got home, I worked in the fish market. Yeah. One of my big dreams was to be able to dress fish as fast as my dad, because he was super fast. And so we had contests all the time, he and me. He loved that. He loved beating me, and I loved wishing I could beat him.
Yeah. So you did that all the way through high school, I guess. And then you
till I
ended up
went to
going
college. Yeah.
And eventually, after college and grad school, and you had worked at some churches, you ended up moving back to work for him.
Yeah.
In his tugboat business.
Right. Dad
So when did he start
Dad
that?
had a tugboat construction business. The first boat he built, my grandfather was building a tugboat behind his own house on just a piece of land that I think he just started using it. Whoever owned it wasn't around or something. I don't think my grandfather ever owned that piece. But he had built, it had two big oak trees. One was a pecan, one was oak, right next to one of the big oak trees. And Papa had built a wooden box, this kind of an 8-sided box, about 2 feet deep, we didn't have treated lumber, so it was just lumber. And he put tar in that big, huge box. It was huge. Because my grandmother, the one who gave birth, like I told you, she, every single day, Sunday included, made nets for fishermen. These 100-foot-long trammel nets or hoop nets, whatever they needed. And she did that 4 in the morning. She was out there netting. She taught me how to net and had me make my own tools for it. But anyway, she would make those. My grandfather had suspended between those two trees a piece of I-beam, this old rusty I-beam. Don't tell him where he got it from or how he got it up there, because he didn't have a crane. I have no idea. That preceded my memory or knowledge. But when I was there was just a simple wooden pulley hanging on that thing up there with a rope on it and a hook on one end. And that hook, he would hook to her net, throw the net in the tar and let it sit. Now, previous to doing that, he built a fire that went all the way around that box. And it would get the tar malleable, just not bubbly, nothing like that. But he could put the net down in there, dip it, and then let it suspend and drip until it was dry. And then it was, we didn't have nylon or anything, that was cotton. And so that was the way they didn't lose their nets through rotting. And so right next to that pit and that little enterprise, everybody in my family had some kind of businesses going, and that was one of theirs. My mom, that was her business. But my grandfather built his first tugboat. No, excuse me, no, it wasn't his first. His last tugboat. It became my dad's first tugboat. Okay. Because he started it and died. So there was a hull, not completed hull, but they had a hull there. And so it stayed there for several years, and my grandmother said to my dad, I wish you would finish that boat. Just finish it. Get it out of my backyard, kind of. I think that was more her motivation than some memorial to my grandfather.
Right.
But so Dad did. And now we're 2 miles from the river. And this is steel hull. Now this was just a 2-decker. We mostly made 3 decks, but this was his first one and my grandfather's last one. So we had to go through town. Dad hired a house moving company to come lift it enough, put their trailer under it. And now we had to go through town. Well, what's across roads? Electric wires, right? We didn't have cable or anything like that, so it was all electric. So Dad said, he always called me boy. He said, boy, get up on top of that thing. Here's a 2x4. And when we get to those lines, you just lift them up so we can go under. And I did. I said, Dad, that looks dangerous. Oh, it won't be dangerous at all.
Now that would have cost you $100,000 to get
you would
the
never
electric
do that.
company
It'd be
out there.
crazy. It would be. And
the liability.
State police and everybody, escorting.
That's crazy. That's wild.
But we just took off.
So that was his first tugboat. How many tugboats were eventually built?
Oh, wow. We built 5 at a time. It took 90 days to build a boat. So
You've told me that before, right? I remember one time you talked, you used that story and you said, I was hired to build a tugboat.
Yeah.
And they dropped the material, and in 90 days, I had to have that boat in the water.
And be building another one.
In 90 days back then.
Yeah, there was 5
Can
at a
anything
time
be
you were
built in
doing.
90 days these days? I don't think so.
We had 81 men. The reason I was there, my dad had congestive heart failure. My dad fought heart problems from almost as long back as I can remember, really, about health, issues. I remember when I was 13, he had a cancer come up on his lip and had to go to the hospital, which was for him was like a jail sentence, to go one night. But he had to stay a week back then, And today they would do it and send you home this afternoon, but it wasn't that way, it was a major deal. And so I'm 13. We're getting 10,000 pounds of fish. We had there was always a lapse in early summer of no fish, or just 1,000 pounds a day with nothing to shop. So Dad says, you're going to get to run my shop, my fish market. I was 13. You talk about one proud boy. I was some kind of happy. I said, wow. Me and Robert and Sonny, we're going to have fun. The next morning, he had to be there at night and have surgery the next morning. We didn't have cell phones or anything. He was in Baton Rouge. I had no idea what was going on. But I did know that Mr. Mick Fedrick showed up first with his truck just loaded down, on the axle almost. And I said, oh, the buffalo are back. And we had, I think the first day, almost 20,000 pounds of fish came in. And I was in charge, 13 years old. Thank God for these other 2 guys. I mean, they really did it. Yeah. But I had the money. I had to pay you for your fish. And if you bought fish, and we had orders that we needed to fill. Anyway, did all of that.
Crazy.
And he was gone for 1 week.
What do you think about letting Piper run the shop, run the store? What is she, 12, 11, 12?
The whole story, listen, and this is an amazing story, and I'm loving every second of it. The only thing that I keep thinking is, we are so doomed.
Oh, yeah.
We can't do anything anymore. Nothing. Like, if the power goes out, we're gonna starve.
Yes.
We're doomed.
Third world country within 24 hours.
I'm just going to come find you.
Yeah, exactly.
So please keep going.
Ready to raise my dad.
So we were talking about
y'all way too much.
So we were talking about how he was a congestive heart failure, and so eventually you end up coming back.
He asked me. I was at a church in Pasadena, Texas. A tremendous church, and we grew like crazy. We baptized 200 people a year, which is then, even in Texas, was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And but we had a pastor who required you to visit every staff member. We had 12 staff members. Every one of us had to visit, and he assigned you the homes that you would go to. You couldn't just go, he had a list. Every Monday you met, and they gave you your list. And so you visited every single night. And then on Saturday, you got there at 8. You had a 1-hour prayer meeting. And then the rest of the day, you reported back to him at 7 that night. That's Saturday. That's what you do on Saturday. Then Sunday after church, you had to stay 2 hours to do all the guests that were there. He had 2 secretaries that all they did was put guest names in the computer and get all that ready for us. And so one day I just said, I started to say his name, but I shouldn't do that. I love this guy. But I said, I'm leaving. I can't do this. I said, I kissed my daughter in her bed, sound asleep in the morning, and I kiss her sound asleep in the bed at night. And unless Galen comes and meets me for lunch, I don't see her. I don't know who she is. And how we were able to have a baby during that time, I don't know, but we did somehow. Yeah, I do know how that happened. Anyway, you know, y'all can bleep that out if you need.
No,
it's staying in.
That's right.
All right. Well, anyway,
we want the real truth.
I just said I can't do this anymore, and I'd had an offer from Louisiana College to come and be the director of financial aid and recruitment. And so I did that. So for 1 year, during that year, Dad got really sick. And he and Mom came to our house in Pineville and he said, boy, if you were at a church, I'd never make this call, but I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Which he had never asked me to do anything for him in my life. Yeah. I mean, you know, like, you know what I'm saying? Something enough for him to drive all that way to say, I want to ask you something. I was really shook up. He said, I want you to come run my business, my tugboat business for me. He said, you're the person I trust to do it, and I want you to do it, and I know you can. I said, Daddy, I helped you build one boat before I went off to college. Fish, boat, all this was going on, all these 9 businesses were going on. I was doing something in all of them. But really, the process of constructing a boat was way out of my range. But he didn't think so. So I said, and
how old were
the
you?
doctor said well, it was 2 years before Laurie was born.
Okay.
So that would have been the 2 years.
1979.
Yeah, 79, 80, 81, somewhere all in there. I started it. She was born in 81. Yeah.
December 81.
I know how that happened.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So
I haven't learned much in life, but that part I got. I was going to tell you, So we go to the bank the next day after, and Dad was he wasn't talking about 6 months from now, he was talking about tomorrow morning. And but the next day I met him, and we went into the bank, went to the president, and he said, same thing he had said when I was about 12 years old. He said, this is my boy. And anything he says, you're supposed to do, because he is my representative. And so, man, I was weak at the knees to think I could sign a check. I could sign a check for $1 million, and that man right there will honor it. And I said just that to him. He said, yes, I will. And I said, okay, well, I guess we're in this now. But you know, we spent a lot of money. He made a lot of money. But 2 weeks later, I had resigned.
Yep.
I was at Louisiana College 365 days exactly. So then that next morning, I was in charge of 81 men building tugboats. Thank God 80 of them knew what they were doing. So they didn't need a lot of me, but they did. You know, you need somebody that says this is the way the ship's going. And so that's what I did for 2 years. And I sold tugboats for Dad. And
so how many did y'all
finished?
How many did y'all build?
We did 5 every 3 months. So how many ever that is? Over 2 years. I did it little over 2 years,
40, 50 boats.
Yeah.
What are they still in operation, these tugboats?
You know, my mother just died last year, and she was 96, and probably 2 years before that, she asked me to drive to Baton Rouge because she had something to show me. And I thought, oh my goodness, I wonder what this is. She would never want to do that. She didn't want you to have to do anything. Yeah. But so I knew it was important, so I went down there and she said, you don't know this, and she gave me the name of this man who had bought like a dozen of Dad's boats through the years. He was just he's from Morgan City, and he was just really loved Dad, and he loved his boats. There's a thing you need to know about tugboats. If you don't build the hull correctly, when you put it in the water and crank up both engines, try to go down, everything on it shakes just like this. So your nose will itch, your snot will come out of your nose, and you're basically miserable. And a lot of guys would every once in a while just jump off those boats, get in the water so they wouldn't be quivering. So there's there's a design that you have to know how to do, or they're all going to do that.
Yeah.
And I've been on many boats that you do like that. So I know what the problem is. I don't know how to correct it at that point. But anyway, my dad knew how to do that.
Yeah.
And so this man that Mom had me come talk to her, she wanted me to read a letter actually that he wrote her. And it said in there that it had been of the 50th anniversary of one of his boats. And he still had them all. Yeah. He said, I have all of the boats I ever bought, and they're still active and running. But this particular one was special to him. I think he had named it after his daughter or something. And anyway, he said, I just wanted you to know how wonderful it was to work with Albert and to be recipient of such fine stuff. You know, he just thought, you know, he'd replaced engines during the course of those times and stuff, but the hull was the same. All the interior was basically the same. I went to see one of his and another guy from Morgan City. They happened to have them close together. He said, you need to come see your dad's boat over here. So I did. But it's awesome. I did a search for some that I remembered names that I had built, and they're still active. Not all of them, but I was able to find them. That's in the registry that keeps record of that. Yeah, they've been very fine.
We need to get into the 7 business principles you took from your dad. That's the whole reason we're here. We're an hour and a half in, second episode, halfway through the second episode.
That's all right.
So these are on the previous episode you had mentioned. This was never a list your dad created. This is a list you created, reflecting on your dad's life and these principles that your dad instilled in you, that apply really to any area of life. But in this sense, as we're talking about small businesses and businesses, and so let's go through them.
Okay. So let me say something to start with. I've been anxious about doing this. Matter of fact, I took a while before I told you I would do it, because my dad died when he was 78 in 2003. I'm 76. I'm fixing to be as old as he was when he died. I've yet to have any heart trouble, but I could drop dead while I'm sitting at this mic, and I realize that. But everything I'm going to talk about, he did a long time ago. And I don't know how businesses have changed. Yeah. So I don't pretend to be here saying these are 7 principles everybody ought to jump on. Yeah. I thought you wanted me, and I wanted y'all to understand. I'm doing it that way. I'm talking to you about what my dad did.
Yeah.
And it so influenced me that I would all the businesses I've had, and I've had quite a few that I've started and done and sold, and I use the same things.
Yeah.
They're not earth shattering. They're common sense stuff. Dad was very commonsensical. Yeah. And when I say he didn't ever make a list, he didn't. Yeah. But did he ever say these things? Yes, he did. All of these are from his mouth. I just put them in a list.
Yeah.
And I told you, I think when I sent this, I said, I've thought of some others since I put this list together, but I didn't get them verified by him. Okay. So I may throw them out.
The 8th one is unverified. Okay.
These are, I'll make sure y'all know that that's it.
All right. So what's the first one?
The customer is always precious. He said, people like to say customer's always right.
Yep.
He said, no, customers can be stupid. And first of all, they have no idea what you put in to providing this product for them or this service for them. They have no clue and don't care. They're just, his idea was this. He said, you go into business and there's a number one thing you want to do. You want to make money. And he considered money to be gold. And so he said, I'm in business to get the gold. And then he would say, well, where is the gold? And he said, I can remember, it ain't in them lar hills. That was a gold miner's little saying, was there's gold in them lar hills. No, Dad said, the gold is in the pockets of your customers. And so they, like the gold they have, are precious. He said, people tell you about your baby, somebody's going to always, that's a precious thing. And you know what it means? That means mama loves it. and she ain't letting go of it. She got it, and it's something special. And he said, that's what a customer ought to be to you. They're precious. You know, on my way here this morning, I went to one of my favorite places to stop between here and Alexandria to get coffee and a piece of sausage. I go in, use the bathroom, go up, get my coffee. They give me a little ticket to go pay for it. And so I'm standing in line. I'm second in line. The other line to my left over here has 4 people in it. And we stand there. Next thing you know, the guy in front of me just leaves his stuff on the counter and leaves. I think, So I'm there. I finally start looking at my watch. I'm there 6 minutes. There are 5 people working behind there, or employed. They're not working. One's doing another's hair, one's doing some fingernail work, and one's putting some chewing tobacco up for the business. So we're all just standing there. Nobody's losing their temper. It's very early in the morning. Everybody's kind of cool. And next thing you know, the lady at the head of the other line, she and I are at 90-degree angles, and I am counting. That's when I find out there are 5 people helping nobody.
Yeah.
Now I look behind me, there are 4 more customers behind me, and there are 5 behind her. And she spots me counting. I guess I must have, shook my 1, 2, 3 or something. And she said, no, I didn't do it quite that bad. She looked at me and said out loud, I just did that too. And I thought, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So finally I said, I got to be in Shreveport.
Yeah.
So I just put my coffee, I'd already drunk half of it, put it there, didn't have anybody to pay. I put my ticket for the food, which had already been brought over in a bag, and I could see it. And I just left.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm not precious to them.
Yeah.
I tell you, my dad's overarching thing, he told me, this is an unverified principle. But he said it to me, I bet 1,000 times in my life. Nobody loves your business like you love your business. And I thought, whoever owns this place would freak out. If he saw 5 people he was paying money to, and they were taking no money in. And there I was with the gold in I probably had $500 on me. They could have taken, they could have sold me a lot of stuff. They weren't going to get but about 6 of it. But I'm just saying, I was there. And they didn't care because their business was their hair and their fingernails and whatever else they were diddling with.
And now I know why you didn't bring a sausage this morning.
Exactly. You're hit. You got it. But anyway, so his big deal was, that nobody loves your business like you love your business. And I can give you lots of stories of that in my life that I have proven it. And he would also say, and that's where you end up having to fire people, because you end up saying, oh, I'm going to make him a manager. He had never liked that term, because it took something of the ownership in his mind away from him, and he thought the owner needed to be the owner and the manager. It made me managing people, but anyway, that's minor. But he felt like you end up trusting people to love it like you love it, and they can't. They cannot do that. You think they can, they sound like they can, they even look like they can for a while, but eventually you have to fire them because they're stealing from you, they're taking advantage of you, they're doing something that is ruining your business, not helping you. These 5 people are ruining that business.
Yeah.
Now, they're going to correct it, and it was just a blip, because I've been there many times, it's never that way. Yeah. But just that little scene lets you know you can let your business go. And it's easy. So he would say, nobody loves it like you. Don't forget that, because when you do, whoever you gave it to, whoever you gave it over to, one day it's going to disappoint you, and that you're going to end up firing them.
Yeah. So. Well, I feel like that could be a whole episode talking about that and unpacking that, right? But and that's funny because
that isn't even one of the principles.
Yeah.
The principle really is the customer's always precious.
Yeah,
Always.
and that's the saying, right? Is the customer's always right? Is that that's what they say, right? But like you said, these guys don't know what they're not right. Yeah,
they can be very wrong.
I love Josh. One of the things you told me you did that you do when you have a upset customer call in, you side with them, right? So they call to complain, and you're like, "Oh, they better not have done that. That is not, And then they're like, "Oh, this guy's on my side."
You emotionally check in with them.
You emotionally check in with them.
Yeah. And instead of just rather than feeling ignored, when someone is kind of emotionally on your level, and sometimes a lot of people aren't expecting that.
Yeah.
They're expecting like a defensive posture.
Yes, you match their emotion. You match their emotion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that is
Well,
good stuff.
When he said that they were precious, he meant that you ought to treat them beyond them being the customer is right. He said being precious is more than you being right. The customer's always right.
Yeah.
They're always going to be right for you. If you want the money out of their pocket, they're going to have to be in some way feel right. But in order for him to get there, we had to see them as something it's like precious metals, gold's a precious metal. Well, you got the gold, I need the gold, I want the gold.
Well, we wouldn't be in business without customers, right? And that is true.
Yeah. Well, there was a lady down in Lafayette. We used to get Lafayette television channels, and she had an RV business. And she would say, her tagline was always the same. I loved it. She said, "You want it? We got it. Come on down and get it." Mm-hmm. And I thought, she really wants me.
That's alluring.
Yes, yes.
No, right. Yes, it's got all kind of side things. But when you saw her, you wouldn't buy. It wouldn't buy. But she was a nice lady. But she wasn't it wasn't a stripper doing it. She was. But I loved the what's the word? The connection she made with people is she cleared everybody out that didn't want an RV, and she focused right in. You want it. Mm-hmm. This is what you want. We got it. All you had to do is come down here, and you drive home with it. Mm-hmm. It was very appeling if you were looking for an RV.
Well, we're going to have to fly through these to be able to get all this in. So So what's the plan? You want to push through these, or do we need to?
I say go at your pace. Once we hit our time, we'll hit our time. If you want to go a little bit faster through them, we can catch them all. Or pick your favorites, however you want to do it.
Or should we just have a part 3 in the next couple of weeks and do it and run it back and finish it up?
Well, it's up to you. I've enjoyed
think?
your time.
I'll stay as long as you want me to. Let me tell you, I loved my dad.
Yeah.
I love his principles.
Yeah.
And I love talking.
Yes.
So, and I love Leighton.
Well, I love hearing it, and I don't want to just fly through it. I think there's a lot to unpack that we can get into.
So let's grab a couple more, and then we can make part 3.
Yeah. What's your second?
The employee is always your family. And he meant by that, that's a hard one because you want to stay. In some ways, he was the boss.
Yeah.
But in other ways, he cared so much for them.
Yeah.
He would tell me, those 2 years I ran the business, I had in 81 people. Let me tell you, there's some knuckleheads, right? And there's some thieves, and there's some lazies, and there's some don't know exactly what they're doing. They're just that. So you want to go in and, kick butt and take names and get rid of the fluff, right?
Yeah.
I had to clear one of my promises Dad made me do was that I'd come to his house every day after work, and that I would talk to him about what's going on. His doctor told me, you may do that, but you may not tell him any bad news.
What'd you talk about?
Right. Well, during that 2 years, we had an employee die in the hull of one of our boats. And so I can't go home and say, hey, we had a great day at work today. So we had a number of times I had to break the doctor's rule. But I would say, Pod, which was the guy that worked there. He's dead now, so I can say his name. It's not his name. It's how he went. Pod is, I got to get rid of him. And he'd say why, and I'd give him a list of whatever was the current Pod problem. And I said, is it all right with you if I fire him? I said, I don't mind firing him. No. He said, have you ever met his wife? No, sir. She lives in Ville Platte. They live in Ville Platte. And he drives back and forth. And Pod used to, every Friday, took his check down to Botta's, which is a bar, a strip bar, and he would spend all his money before he got home on Friday afternoon. And so he was broke. He couldn't buy food for the kids. So she came to me one day and she said, Mr. Albert, would you be able to do me a favor? And what is that? And she described what he was doing. Dad didn't know he was doing that, but anyway, she said, would you, on Friday, if I get here early enough, give me his check and leave some of it and give him a check, but it's separate, a different, you know, if he got $500 and she took $450 and he got $50. Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, I'll do that. And so that was how he got 2 checks. Mm-hmm. But he didn't get but one of them. And he said, have you ever met the kids? No, sir. Well, he's got a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, and you know, they don't wear clothes like everybody else. You know, they got the scrubbiest stuff to wear. And he said, you gonna take their food off their table? Well, no, I wouldn't want to do that. He said, well, then he listed what Pod did do that was positive, that did help the business. And I said, okay, I'm not going to fire him. He had a heart for every one of those men, and he just did. You know, for those 2 years, every single morning we had to have a safety meeting as a government thing. And so I had all those men in that big trailer with listening to me every morning, talking about some safety issue, and I'd let them belly out about anything they wanted to say, you know, might be fussing about or something. So they did. And I cannot tell you how many times they would say, well, how's Mr. Albert? And so Mr. Albert, my dad, conversation would begin. And before a minute or two had passed, somebody had stood up and just testified. Let me tell y'all what, Mr. Albert walks his talk. They loved him, and he loved them. And I think that's why he made that such a big thing. They are part of your family. And he would say, they feed your family. You can't build a tugboat without those 81 men. Or you can't build 5 without those 81 men. Mm-hmm. And so they are feeding your family. Mm-hmm. And don't ever forget that. So I guess it's back to Precious again, but he counted them bad and all, negligent and all, stubborn and all, as part of the family. And he would have described those 3 words I just used and said, I got family members that are just like that. Yeah. You know? And I put up with them. Mm. Now, if somebody robbed him, stole from him, he didn't like that. Mm. So he would fire you. Yeah. But it had to be an extreme case, because if he knew, and he did, if he knew much about you, he cared about you. Mm. And so I was just important to him, Leighton. Yeah. I don't even know you can carry that into a big business. Yeah. You can't know everybody.
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, and we've talked about it on the podcast before. It's just the line between being a employer and being a friend, mm-hmm. right? And it goes both ways, because it's a very fine line.
Yes, and
it is hard, you know. And I've hired friends before that didn't turn out well, right. And I've hired some friends that have been great, but it's always like, you know, this kind of risk reward. Am I okay this not working out and this person not being a friend of mine anymore, right? Yeah. Right. And that's difficult. But
I used to tell people when I hired them for our church, So I hired everybody but the pastor and music minister. I was responsible for hiring, and so did a lot of hiring. And we had a daycare that had over 100 employees, so I did a lot of hiring and firing and stuff. And I can still hear them telling me about themselves, because I always wanted to know something about them. You didn't want to put somebody in a little 2-year-old room and you didn't know anything about them. So there was a sense of that I needed to know. But for my dad, it was just he wanted to know. He wanted to know, and he really, really believed that without you, he couldn't exist. His business couldn't exist.
Well, and you think of the industry too, just the working conditions. I mean, if people weren't, out of those 81 men, if somebody wasn't doing their job, it affected everyone, right? And those conditions were, I mean, I would say this a lot, but I mean, you spend more time with your employers than you do your family in most instances, right? Because when you're at home, you're sleeping or you're doing other stuff or hobbies or ball games. I mean, you're around your employees and your coworkers a lot, and so there has to be some kind of family element. I mean, right? Where you might hate your family, but yeah, I mean, that's just
I
the nature of it.
don't think he ever wanted us to be mom, dad, sisters, brothers, family.
Yeah.
It was business family. Is that a correct term?
Sure.
I don't even know what it was. I just know these are his words. Your employees are your family.
Yeah, and I think what it is that there's a care beyond the job responsibilities.
Transactional nature.
Exactly. There is a care. And I'm not good at this, right? And it's hard in the situation we're in.
Right.
It's very difficult. You have multiple locations, you have multiple managers, you have new employees. I mean, there's an entry-level position into one of my companies. I don't get to know that person.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if they're there for years, there's opportunities for me to do that.
Well, there's a lot of pushback today, online, social media, and things about like, oh, we're all family, but you're going to fire me, and really, you're right. We don't have like the perfect word for it because we use the word family in our business. We're a family business, but there is some reality there that you would probably have a little bit more forgiveness for your brother than you would for somebody at the shop.
Sure.
But I think to the point that what you're getting at is this principle of a deep care for the people who are in your organization and to really love them, and to really know them. And that's what I'm hearing your dad did. And you're right. The testimonials they gave to him wasn't because he was probably some great business mind, which he sounds like he was pretty good at it, or some genius, some great orator, or corporate, whatever his name is, Jack Bezos or something. Yeah. It was because he cared about them, and that's what they were responding to.
That's what they were saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
When he said that he cared for them, which he would say, that they knew he really meant that. Yeah. And Dad was never one that believed you ought to be the 100% rescuer of anybody. He thought that was dangerous for them because then they felt like they could do anything and they were going to be rescued. But to be a partial rescue for somebody was a great thing to do and be. My dad was the most generous person I ever knew, and but I never knew him to go in and buy you a brand new car or pay your house note for a year. But if your kids needed food and clothes, let me tell you, there was nobody better at it than him, and he didn't want any acclaim for it, but he got it in our little old town because there's not a lot of people out doing it.
And you shared your mom would say when God saved Albert, he saved all of them, right? And that's the thing, right? There's no people see through whenever you're one way here and one way here, right? And that's just him. I mean, he was just a generous person because God changed his heart and he was a generous person, right?
Right.
And that bled over. But then also I'm thinking through this too, you use the word family is like, it's not their family, so we're not going to discipline them, right?
That's
Think
correct.
of your kids, right? I mean, I love my kids, so I do discipline them. I do have boundaries for them. I don't let them run across the street to get a ball, even though that's what they want. I know what's better for them, right? And so family is not just, it's just total freedom. You're not going to get reprimanded,
Yeah.
right? It's almost like I love you as family, so I am going to reprimand you, so you can be a better
it's
person.
for the cares of the others, right? Because if the brother is like whacking on his sister, then like you got to take care of her.
Yeah.
You know, like that's as you're as the leader, you have to take care of the whole family.
good-
and when
good
somebody
point.
steps out of line, if it's hurting the whole family, you have to address that.
Yeah. It's all good stuff.
Yeah.
I like it.
Y'all want me to move on, so I will.
Well, what do you want to? You want to do one more, and then we'll cut it, and we'll have to come back for the other 4.
Yes.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Look, there's not. You're not far from here. You know.
That's right.
Look,
The bank is always selling money. Now, when I was 10 years old, maybe 11, probably in my 10th year, he took me to St. Landry Bank in Opelousas, which is where he banked at the time. He only had 2 banks in his life, that one and the Bank of Maryland. But Bank of St. Landry Bank and Trust, we walked in there. And they treated everybody this way. He wasn't like some special person. Everybody went in the president's office because he wanted you to come in there. He wanted you know. He wanted to know you, and he wanted you to drink coffee with him. So, but we walk in like we own the place and go right straight to the bank president's office. Me and my dad, and I'm literally just a little scrawny kid, and he says, he calls man, and he says, now this is my boy, and we've come today for him to make a loan from your bank. You know, he had told me at one time we were going to do this, but not on the way to that bank.
Yeah.
While we're just going, following him along. You know, I thought he was doing something. He said, oh, well, the banker said, yeah, that's good. Well, how much does he want? He wants to borrow $300. And let me tell you, just parenthetically, at my age, you could buy a brand new car for $700. Mm-hmm. So $300 was a huge thing. It doesn't sound like much today, does it? You know, but it was huge. I couldn't believe he was saying it, and I really, upon reflection later, I thought the banker must have been crazy, but he had my dad's name. So he felt comfortable with it, and he said he told me, boy, that's a lot of money. Yes, sir. What are you going to do with it? I don't know. I didn't have a plan. We should have talked through that, but it didn't matter. It was going to be really a signature loan, and I didn't know anything about those terms or anything back then. But my dad said, "Now you will pay this back because we are building your future right now. So what you do over the next 3 years is going to produce for the rest of your life." And so I didn't understand. They didn't have credit scores back then. You know, Dad said he took me to his grocery store, and we were putting up beans, cans of beans that come in, and we were putting them where they belonged on the old shelves there. And he took one of them like that, and we were talking about this loan. He said, I don't want you to ever go in a bank with your hat in your hand. That was his little term. Meaning, please loan me some money. No. He said, you see these beans right here? What if I quit buying beans? He said, what would people do? I said, well, they wouldn't be buying beans, would they? He said, and eventually, if I keep doing that with the tuna fish and whatever, you know, bread, they're not coming here at all. I'm going to go out of business. I have got to have beans for people to buy. Well, a banker sells money, and if somebody doesn't buy it, he's going out of business. So when you go there, you're the best friend he's got. He's only looking for 2 things when you walk in the door. He said, now remember, this was a day when most women were at home, so he used the word man, but it would apply any male or female today for sure. He's looking for a man, a good man, with a good plan. He said, a good man, now today we'd do that by credit scores and some other data we could get, but back then, a good man was somebody who had a good reputation. There were no lawsuits against him. And basically, these little banks, it was somebody nearby that we've observed. He goes to our church. We'd see him at the market or whatever. But a good man So a good man is somebody that pays his bills, basically, and a good plan. And the plan had to be something that you were going to use the money for, that the bank was assured, because it was such a good plan, that they would get their money back with interest. And if that was true, the equal was you could take the money home. And I still believe it today.
Yeah.
That there's still, one of my dear friends is bank president down in Alexandria. And I went to him with this principle. I said, I just want to talk to you a while about some things. And he was interested in my dad's principles. And I told him, this is what he said about bankers. I said, is that still true? He said, couldn't be a truer thing said. Is what's what we want. We want customers to come in that we can trust. So you're a good man, good woman. And you've got an idea what you're going to do with it that's going to provide us back the money we need to pay our stockholders, blah, 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 blah. I said, so that one's held on for years.
Yeah. No, I think it's still true.
I still think it's true, don't
Yeah.
you?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're going to go buy property that you're going to refit, which I do, and flip and sell,
Yeah.
and I'm going to get my money back plus my interest, and you get some money. What's wrong with that plan? That's a good plan.
Yeah.
Now, you go buy one that's too far off, they say that's not a good plan,
Yeah.
so we're not selling you any money.
Well, and I tell people that all the time, especially young investors. I'm like, you have to build trust with the bank. You just, it doesn't matter if you're a doctor. I mean, if you're making $500,000 a year, if you just go into a bank and they don't know who you are, and you're saying, "Hey, I'm going to go buy this trailer park," they're going to say,
I'm
"No,
sorry."
yeah." I mean, you have to build trust, and so that's and you do need to start young, right?
Yeah.
And be loyal to them.
Yeah.
And so
Hey,
yeah,
I
no,
paid
agree.
every penny back. Never was late, not one time.
Exactly.
My dad wouldn't have let me. But I would.
Yeah.
He, you know what he told the bank president? He said, "I want you to tell him how much he's gonna owe you every week."
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Albert, he doesn't have to pay but once a month. He said he's got to pay every week, because if he doesn't, by the end of the month, he may have spent it all, and we ain't never going there. So we're going to do it every Friday.
Yeah.
We'll be here every Friday. Yeah. So he drove me to Opelousas 20 miles one way every Friday to pay that. Just go to the teller, or sometimes to him, his office.
That's great stuff. Yeah.
But that's how we did it. And I paid every penny of it back with interest. And they gave me what it was, the sheet that's got how much you're going to pay and how much is interest, that full sheet. I kept that for years because it was interesting to me that I had started that early.
Josh, how are you teaching your daughter about money?
Well, the other day I had her provide a service for me.
Okay.
And her mother looked in and said, you probably should have paid her to do that for you. And so she gets the idea in her head that I should have paid her, that I was exploiting her.
Yes.
And so she demanded $20 payment for the service that she rendered. And I was thinking to myself, I don't really feel like doing this. So I kept pushing it off and putting it off.
Yeah.
And then a team member at one of the stores, she mentioned it to him. And he jokingly said, well, now he owes you interest.
Oh, there you go.
And so last night on the couch, my interest has ballooned quite a bit.
Okay.
Now the debt has been paid.
Okay.
But now she is holding tight on that interest.
The interest. I like it.
So maybe I've taught her indirectly, but I did have to come back and say, well, listen, maybe because of the fact of all the things that we do as your parents to take care of you, maybe I can have some good faith on this interest.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll waive it since the debt has been paid. So, I've been working some negotiations with her. And
you might start talking about contracts.
Yeah.
Well, you present your contract that shows I owe it, I will gladly pay it.
It's 30 days interest.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did say, as she was haggling for the interest, I did say, listen, when we initially set this deal up, we didn't talk about interest. Interest was not on the table. This was introduced later.
Yes.
And so we had I used the word, we had a verbal contract.
Yes.
And right now you're a little out of bounds.
We never spoke of that.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I listen, these first 3 points, I could listen to you all day long. This has been a lot of fun.
I know, right?
These stories are great, and the principles are very, very good. So we've made it through 1 through 3.
Yes.
And we're going to come back.
We'll look at the calendar.
And do the rest of, and by then you may have remembered a few more that you really like. But listen, thank you. This was great. I loved it. Had a great time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Cool.